All right. Hello, everyone. Listen to the recording. Welcome. This is our 10th Compute Over Data Working Group session, and we're joined by John Elliott from Niche Consulting today. We've had a lot of conversations in the past around best practices for hiring and recruiting. Of all the different projects in the Compute Over Data Working Group, most of us do not have a background in hiring and recruiting. I also don't myself. A lot of conversations back in September about how do we bring on a team quickly. So this is a great complement for us in terms of just skill sets. And it's interesting because now we're in a bear market. So there's dynamics that we have to deal with about getting folks in the bear market, and then bear markets don't last forever. So, hiring will continue in a different path once we get back into the next bull market. So John, if you are ready, I'll hand it over to you and let you take us through some content.
Yeah, for sure. So just to give everybody some feedback on to who I am, I've been recruiting for over 13 years now. I started my own specialized recruiting firm a little over 6.5 years ago to help startups scale and hire talent, because hiring for small companies is very, very different from hiring for a large company. You don't have the same employer brand. You've got to be very good at telling your story, and you've got to get creative on how to capture top talent and get them to come work for you. So that's always been my passion, is helping smaller companies scale. I think it's more fun and exciting. And so, yeah, I want to share with you guys kind of best practices and things to expect while hiring, things to consider. And then, at the end, I'm more than happy to do a Q&A if anyone has questions. But to kick it off, wanted to talk over hiring best practices for Web3 companies that I've noticed. One big thing is always, defining the job requirements and responsibilities clearly in your job description. Too often, I've worked with some startup companies where it's kind of a moving target. They create a job description, but then the candidate interviews and finds out, oh, there's all these other duties, or this isn't exactly what they marketed out to the market. And so that can create challenges there. It's important to have a clear understanding of the skills and experience required for the job and to communicate this to potential candidates. It'll help attract the right candidates and ensure that they have a clear understanding of what's expected of them. And then, another huge part of that job description is to sell your brand, to tell your story, and to grab the reader. So don't just quickly slap together a job description and think that that's going to get, some rock star engineering candidate interested. They get tons of job descriptions sent to them a day, or if they're actively looking, they're looking through tons of different companies. You really need to do your best to use creative writing to make your job post stand out from the rest. So, is your company changing the world? If they are, then tell the reader how you're doing that. Let them know how excited you are about the company mission and why employees love working there. Another important part here is to use a diverse recruitment process. So Web3 companies should aim to create a diverse, global, and inclusive workplace. This can be achieved through a diverse recruitment process, which may include using Web3 job boards and recruiters that cater to underrepresented groups. Actively seek out candidates from a variety of geographic locations as well as experiences. Personally, I've found that engineers in places like Argentina, for example, have been using Bitcoin for years and are more knowledgeable actually on blockchain and the Web3 space. And the reason why is because they've had to use digital assets to offset the inflation there. They've seen the change it can make for their families there by investing in these digital assets and holding them. And it excites them. They want to work in the space. So people from countries like this, where they've had access to digital assets for, since 2015, 16, 17, are eager to work in the industry, and they're already very familiar with the underlying principles of blockchain. Another big thing is to offer competitive compensation and benefits. Web3 companies should offer competitive compensation and benefit packages to attract top talent. This may include salary, bonuses, equity, perks, such as flexible working arrangements. That's one of the biggest things that's going to attract top talent to Web3. Many people these days don't want a typical 9-to-5. They want a situation where they can travel, spend times with their family, and then knock out code whenever it makes sense. Obviously, they would show up for meetings or whatever, and depending on the role, these things may change, but offering flexible work-life balance is huge, as well as compensation and benefits. Another huge thing is providing proper onboarding. With too many startups, I see, okay, you get a great person in, but the onboarding's non-existent. And so the ramp time takes a long time for people to get up and running. Web3 companies should have a structured onboarding process. And if they don't have one, they should, build one as soon as possible if they're planning on hiring. They really need an onboarding process in place to help new hires become productive and integrated into the team as quickly as possible. And this may include, training on company culture, processes, the technologies, as well as support and guidance from mentors within the company and other experienced team members. There are platforms that your company can utilize to make this easier. All onboarding platforms have an upfront time commitment, but once you do it, onboarding is set up and every new employee can go through that process. Instead of having to use someone's time to get that employee up and running, you may already have that video tutorial ready to go on every topic. And the cost savings in time can be quite significant if you plan to hire 10, 20 plus people over the next year or so. If you only have a couple hires coming in the next year, maybe it doesn't make sense yet, but knowing when to pull the trigger on a proper onboarding system, it will save you tons of money and time of your current employees, which will increase productivity. Another thing is to foster a positive company culture. Web3 companies should aim to create a positive and supportive culture that encourages teamwork, collaboration, innovation. This can help attract and retain your top talent. It can also contribute to a more productive and enjoyable environment. So those are just a few things. Some of them are probably common sense, but still it's good to have them top of mind. I'd like to touch on recruiting strategies for Web3 companies as well. One of the most important things here in this day and age is obviously leveraging social media. Web3 companies can use social platforms such as LinkedIn, Twitter, and Discord to advertise job openings and connect with potential candidates. It's great to be involved in multiple Web3 Discord communities for finding contract labor that are familiar with the space. You may even be able to find perm employees. However, recruiting on Discord is very challenging just because there's not a ton of search parameters and there's a lack of information in regards to everyone's credentials. But I've seen some Web3 companies have a lot of success with this because they've built such great communities within Discord. So there's still opportunity there. It's just you got to be smart about it and know which communities you're engaging with including how you engage with your own and get that information out there. But it's key to be active in groups and not be afraid to comment on people's posts and to help build your network on LinkedIn. Specifically, trying to build a company following on your page on LinkedIn by regularly engaging and posting content is only going to help you over time. Most job seekers are on LinkedIn. It's the #1 platform, even for people in the Web3 space. And it's a great place to pull people that are from Web2 companies into Web3 because there's tons of people who work at Google and companies like that who are very interested in Web3, but they just haven't made the jump yet. They may know a lot about it and in their spare time be spending time researching and doing things in the Web3 space, but they just haven't had a job pop up yet that's in line with their experience. Another big thing, which every small company does this, is to utilize employee referrals. Encouraging current employees to refer talent can be an effective way to get great employees. A lot of companies will offer some sort of a referring bonus. So, if you refer an employee in, you get a $2,000 bonus, $3,000 bonus, something like that, just to spur more referrals internally. Another huge thing is attending industry events. So always have someone within your company that's going to go to these industry events to help tell people about your company. You want to connect with potential candidates and build your company brand at these events, like Web3 ATL that Wes was at and I was at just the other week. Partnering with educational institutions is another huge thing. Georgia Tech put on the Web3 ATL thing, a group there, which was 404 DAO, but Web3 companies can partner with educational institutions like Georgia Tech to find talented candidates and foster a pipeline for future employees. So this can include sponsoring hackathons, hosting internships, offering job shadowing or mentorship opportunities. Utilizing recruiting agencies and search firms is another key way to get talent. When you need an experienced individual to join your company, but you don't have the time to go recruit yourself, working with recruiting agencies and search firms can help Web3 companies access a wider pool of candidates and hopefully get you some more candidates that are going to be in line with your job description, because you're essentially paying someone to go out and market your job to prospective candidates who match what you're looking for. Employer branding is also very important for a number of reasons, and it's something to be top of mind of from the very beginning of starting the company, and as you start to roll out talent acquisition processes. The reason why employer branding is so important is for attracting top talent. A strong employer brand, let's say Google, Facebook, SpaceX, Tesla, can help a company attract talent. As candidates are more likely to apply for jobs with companies they know of and they see on a regular basis. Startups don't have the luxury of having that huge marketing budget to get their name out there like that, with maybe a product that people are using every day. However, starting by building your employer brand at conferences and telling your story on a regular basis using social media is huge to drive internal submittals, to get people to actually submit directly to your company. It's also important for retaining employees. So a positive employer brand can help retain your employees, as they're more likely to stay with a company that has a great reputation in the market. They may be afraid to leave a company that has such a great reputation, for one that doesn't have that same brand. Improving company performance, a strong employer brand can help improve a company's performance, as employees are more likely to be motivated, engaged, and productive when they work for a company that others perceive as reputable and that values its employees. Another thing about employer branding is it can enhance your company reputation. A positive employer brand can enhance the company's overall reputation, as it can attract positive media attention and customer loyalty. So it can benefit the brand in more ways than just talent acquisition. It can actually help, drive people to buy your products. Reducing recruitment costs. So the main reason to build that employer brand and to start early is because over time it's going to drastically reduce recruitment costs, as it can lead to higher volume of qualified candidates applying, which reduces the need for costly recruiting firms. So overall, employer branding's important because it'll help the company attract and retain top talent, improve company performance, as well as reduce recruitment costs. How much should you expect to spend on talent acquisition costs as a startup? This is something that it differs based on each company and what your growth goals are, but it can be difficult to determine exactly how much your budget should be allocated to this. But it'll depend on some various factors, such as the size of your company, the industry in which you're operating, your growth goals for the year, strength of your employer brand, and the current job market. But generally speaking, a company should budget roughly 3 to 5% of their yearly budget to talent acquisition costs, which is using a recruiting firm or hiring people internally to find the talent. Finding and hiring talent is critical to the success of the business, and unfortunately, it's not a cheap endeavor. It's something that is always going to be costly. So, however, it's very important to strike a balance and not overspend on talent and at the expense of other areas of your business. So companies should carefully evaluate their talent acquisition needs at the beginning of the year, allocate their budget accordingly, and stick to it. I see too many companies kind of flip-flopping on talent acquisition budgets midway through the year. And I understand things happen, but it's very important if you have certain growth goals and you can make them happen and you think it's valuable to the business to stick to your plans and try to grow by that whatever number you set forth in the beginning of the year. It's also helpful to track and measure the return on investment of your talent acquisition cost to ensure that they're producing the desired results you're looking for. So if you track the data and you can tweak the talent strategy over time, then ideally you can optimize year after year and decide, okay, how much should we spend on recruiting services this year. Is it time to hire an internal recruiter and build a talent department? Things like that. And another thing that's huge here is just learning about how much recruiting tools cost. So a lot of people have no idea how expensive some of these recruiting tools are. So I mean, if you only have 1 or 2 hires and you're trying to do it internally, and you want someone to go out there and be your recruiter who's not normally a recruiter, then you can try doing that for a while with some cheap solutions, but eventually to get the right talent, you're gonna have to spend a lot of money on recruiting tools. So most recruiting firms spend $10,000 per recruiter just on software, just on the tools they use to source talent. And while job boards used to be a viable option recruiting in like the mid 2000s, LinkedIn currently has a monopoly as the best sourcing application for tech and engineering. Companies like Dice and Career Builder used to have a pretty big foothold on the space, but they scared away most great engineering candidates because they sold their data to too many companies and recruiters. So now Dice actually leverages web crawling techniques that rely, more on crawling the web and sourcing data from LinkedIn even, than the candidate willingly giving them their data. So LinkedIn Recruiter Pro costs roughly $6,000 a year, and it's only available for yearly contracts. So this is something to consider, when you are going to be doing some internal recruiting yourself. And then in addition to this, recruiters use other platforms for candidate engagement and candidate tracking as well. For a small company, a LinkedIn Recruiter Lite license may allow you to hire maybe 1 to 3 employees a year. But if you're planning to hire more than that, then you really need some sort of recruiting solution, because using a part-time recruiter at your company who also has another job just probably isn't going to get it done, depending on where you're at as a company. And there was a few reasons why you might choose to hire, a service versus hiring, an internal talent department. And it's a hard thing to tell when it's time to actually build that talent department versus, use recruiting services. But a few factors that can help you determine whether it's time to do that is, what's the size of your company? Your business with a large number of employees or high volume of hiring may benefit from that internal recruiting department, as this can help to streamline the recruitment process over time and ensure that it's well coordinated. You'll also own all the data and information. But on the other hand, the flip side of that is a smaller business may not have the resources or the need for that internal recruiting department and may find that using a recruiting service is more cost effective. Hiring an internal recruiting department is going to have a huge upfront cost, and over time will save you money. But using a recruiting service just for a few hires a year is by far the best decision there if you can't fill the position on your own and you're not seeing any progress just with job postings or anything like that. So one factor that can drive this decision is, what are your recruitment needs? If a business has complex or specialized recruitment needs, they're probably going to need a headhunter. You're going to need someone specialized. Another huge thing is, what's your budget? The cost of hiring internal recruiting department, as I said before, can be expensive upfront, but over time will save you money if you're planning on hiring 10 people, 20 people, 30 people for the next 5 years. So ultimately, the decision to use a recruiting service or hire internal recruiting department will depend on your needs and goals of the business. But it's important to know when it's time to reach out to a recruiting service versus, kind of hope and pray that the right candidate applies. And speaking on to that, it's also important to know what type of employees you should hire. When is it a good time to hire a contract employee versus a perm employee? And once again, it goes back to, what are your needs? Are they long-term? Are they short-term? What is the budget? As we just saw in the tech space, a lot of companies had huge layoffs, and a lot of these employees I saw were hired just 3 months ago, 6 months ago, and they were already laid off. And a ton of contractors were let go as well at some of these companies like Twitter. But there's a few reasons why you would choose to hire contract versus permanent, and it's important to know when to hire a contract employee. The first one is, if it's a short-term need. If a company has a specific project or task that needs to be completed within a short amount of time, 3 months, 6 months, it's going to be more cost-effective to hire a contract employee to work on that project. The other is flexibility. Contract employment can provide companies with flexibility in terms of the duration of work and the ability to scale up or down the workforce as needed. And then the other thing is cost savings. Hiring contract employees can be less expensive than hiring perm employees, as the company is not responsible for benefits, health insurance, retirement plans, paid time off. On the other hand, there's several reasons why you would want to hire perm employees. One is if you're trying to grow headcount, you want to show on paper that your company is actively growing. You're planning on, trying to get a new funding round. You want to show that you're actively growing permanent employees. The other thing is, if it's a long-term need, then that would be a permanent employee. Another huge thing is company culture. Hiring contractors can greatly impact your company culture. Some large companies are 40-50%, contractors, and it completely changes the dynamic and culture for the permanent employees that are there. Hiring a perm employee will help build and maintain the positive company culture, as they're more likely to become integrated into the company and contribute to its long-term success and be committed to growing, within that business. The other thing with the perm employee is the loyalty aspect. Permanent employees will be more loyal to the company and have greater investment in its success. They may work, longer hours and commit to, time at night or on the weekends to get a project done. Whereas, a contract employee is only going to be doing whatever their billable hours allow them to. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it. I'm trying to see if there was anything else I didn't hit on. But yeah, I think that's my spiel. That's all the bullet points I wanted to go over with you guys, and I'm happy to take, questions if anyone has any.
Very helpful, John. Thank you. Thank you for all the content there. I think I'm definitely learning a lot. One follow-up question for you, as a team in the working group is thinking about budgeting for engineering hires.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any current best practice in terms of how much the cost of an engineer should be? Like, are there certain websites or resources that people should go to start budgeting, whether it's smart contract development or back-end core development?
It really depends on a variety of things. Like, the location is huge. If you're trying to hire in the US and you know that you want them to be US based, obviously if they're in the Bay Area, then they're going to be far more expensive. But the going rate from what I see is anywhere from 120K to, 250K, depending on location and where they're at. I mean, obviously experience level is huge as well. I know that's a big gap there. But I have clients that come to me and say, hey, this is our budget for a role. And I immediately tell them, okay, well, then we're going to be searching in Argentina and Poland, because I know that in those places, that's what engineers go for. Whereas in the US, we may be $50,000 off in terms of base salary. But if a company, can spend to hire in the US, then, for a blockchain developer, let's say you want a Solidity developer, I mean, on average, you're going to want to spend at least 150K if they're here in the US and they have a few years under their belt. And then there's also the consultants that do it, and they're going to, bill you a high hourly rate. But let's say you need a Solidity engineer for just a quick 3-month or 6-month contract. It's way less headache to go out and hire that consultant who can come in and just knock it out, rather than, have a full-time employee, unless you need them long-term. I don't know if that answers your question. In terms of, like, I mean, I know you mentioned other websites, not that I know of, to be honest. Like, okay. I literally learn just from being in the market every day and talking to people. But there are websites that have, but they're always wrong. Like, right? Like, there's Glassdoor and there's sites like that. But the numbers they throw out there, it's kind of a crapshoot, honestly, because it depends on the company. And I see numbers that are way off. So I don't think it's something that you can really, like, stick to by utilizing one of those sites. There could be a site in the Web3 space I'm not aware about yet that is posting these things. I know that Comparably does that, but I just don't know how accurate those numbers are. It takes a lot of data from the Web3 companies inputting it before we can get some clear understanding. And to be honest, I don't know if every company wants that information out there. So I don't know if they're going to be willingly telling everyone what they're paying necessarily.
No, that's good context. I know it's very different in the Web3 versus Web2 space. So it's just good to hear perspective on what's, sources of truth. Maybe there aren't. Maybe you just have to be out there in the space for a while and figure it out. And that's fine
Yeah.
too.
Well, the Web3 space, that's the other thing, is it's still hiring for a lot of positions that are, Web2 as well, like mobile engineer or whatever, or front end engineers, so those guys, the Web2 salary is going to stay the same across Web3. If the Web3 companies want to land them, they're going to have to at least be close to what they're making at the Web2 companies. But for the most part, I mean, Solidity is in such high demand right now. It's honestly hard to keep track of how much people are willing to pay, because if you need a Solidity engineer and they're not there, then obviously that rate's going up over time. It's just supply and demand.
That makes sense. One other interesting thing I'm curious to get your take on is in the Web3 space, there's this unique phenomenon of anonymous profiles.
Yeah.
And some of the folks that I follow that are like top security researchers that are finding vulnerabilities and posting those, they very much value their personal anonymity for a variety of security reasons.
Yeah.
And I'm seeing other organizations and also even VC firms hire these folks in-house as researchers and everything. Does that show up at all in any of the conversations you're having? Or
I think it's awesome. I want to see more of it, but to be honest, most companies are still so old school that it's hard. I mean, only a Web3 company will be cool with that and be like, yeah, okay, we don't need to KYC. We don't need to know who our employee, or I guess it would be KYE, know who our employee is. And we're just hire anonymous, and we will, once they finish a project, we'll send money to this wallet. I think it's awesome. I think in the future, I hope DAOs will operate that way, a lot of them, if the government doesn't get involved. I have a feeling the government's not going to allow it, because then how do they track your taxes? So
yeah,
they're going to be all over it. But I think it's awesome, because in a perfect world, I would love to see companies be able to hire an anonymous person who could live anywhere in the world and be paid for their skill set. That's how it should be. That's ultimate freedom in my mind's eye. But I see the same thing with privacy in the Bitcoin space. A lot of people in that sector too, like especially if they're Bitcoin OGs, they want their privacy. They don't want to be known. They wear masks when they do interviews. They have a anonymous name, because like people get targeted. If people know who you are and they think you have a lot of Bitcoin or a lot of Ethereum or whatever, you're asking for something bad to happen, if you're not well off. But in the space of people working, I hope we see more anonymous, employees working for DAOs and that being a thing. But we're still just waiting on a lot of regulation as to how that's all going to pan out. I think some countries may be okay with it. Others are going to want their tax dollars. They don't want you earning a single cent without, 30-40%.
Yeah. That makes sense. Wow. Now this is super interesting. I'll just pause if anybody else in the call has any other questions for John. And if not, we can ask the folks to listen to the recording to send their questions to the Slack channel. John, what's the best way if folks have additional questions about hiring, recruiting, for them to get in touch with you?
Yeah, for sure. They can link up with me on LinkedIn. My name is John Elliott. My company is called Niche. Or you can just send me, an email directly. My email is john@nicherecruiting.com, and I'm sure we'll share that in the Slack channel as well. If anyone has any questions or want to reach out, or if you're looking for some recruiting help and support, I'd love to, talk with you guys and help any way I can.
Fantastic. John, thank you so much for all the content today. I think it's going to be super helpful for a lot of us there. The teams that are starting from scratch, building their first engineering hires coming soon and all those sorts of things. So we appreciate it. And we'll continue the conversation in the Slack channel.
Perfect. Sounds good. I've got everything I talked about today on a Google Doc as well. So if you want, I can share that for you to send to people as well, just in writing format if they ever want to check it out.
That will be lovely. Yeah, we'll post it on there for follow-ups.
Perfect.
All
awesome.
right.
Thanks, Wes.
Lovely. Have a great day. Take care.
Bye.